Hello, beautifuls. You're listening to Bliss and Grit. I'm Brooke Thomas. I'll be joined soon by my very dear friend and co-host, Vanessa Scotto. On the show, we're talking about being on the embodied spiritual path. And what does that mean? What is a real evolution of our lives? How do we ultimately embrace everything, all the beauty and crazy, the joys and the messes, the bliss and the grit that is a human life? We are attempting to sort that out for ourselves here on the show and in life. In today's episode, we're talking about holding space for not knowing. So why are we culturally people who think we need to know things? There's this underlying assumption that we can know definitive capital T truths, and we want bedrock answers. We want to avoid the feeling of groundlessness that comes with not definitively knowing things. But the trouble with this is that we look outside of ourselves for prescriptions on how to live, and we wind up creating a society where the stronger your opinion, the more right you must be. We also wind up without space for sourcing our own answers, or for differing viewpoints, or for the experience of evolving understandings that can shift over time and be alive in their unfolding. So let's delight in a little groundlessness today, shall we? If you're enjoying the show, we would be thrilled if you left a review on iTunes or on our Facebook page, which is Bliss and Grit. You can also head over to the website, blissandgrit.com, and subscribe to hear any updates. We will have upcoming events this summer, and the people on that list will be the first ones to hear about it, so do sign up. And also heads up that there will not be a show next week because Vanessa and I will be finishing up our realization process training with Judith Blackstone in Michigan. Last note before we start the conversation, we swear there is profanity. So if you're at work, if you're with your children, please wear some headphones. Okay, here we go. Hello, beautiful.
Hello, my love.
So I just got back from moderating a symposium called Beyond Anatomy at the Breathing Project in New York. So my brain's a little tired. I'm going to be going out in my head and searching for the just right word. That's my caveat that I might be a little slow to say the words right now. So it was interesting. I do another podcast, for those of you who don't know, called Liberated Body, and it's obviously about the body. And this was a really beautiful gathering with Leslie Kaminoff, Amy Matthews, and Pete Blackaby, three beautiful teachers, where we literally just gathered to hold space to not know everything. You know what I mean? Like, I'm simplifying it. Like, there was so much that we got into and that I got out of the weekend, and I'm very much in digestion mode. But one of the primary reasons for gathering, and one of the main things that I got out of it, is, wow, like, we're all gathered here together just to say we don't need to hold our models of the human body, say, so biomechanical model of yoga versus a sensing model, body mind centering meets yoga teaching meets manual therapy, we have all these different people. And that we don't all need to hold our models so closely that we identify with them and that we claim them as the rightest, truest, goodest, shiniest nugget of truth. And then whenever we gather together, what we're doing is defending our model, defending our truth. And we spend our career lives polishing up. Look at my truth. It's the rightest one. So it was this really gorgeous thing that does not exist enough, which is so crazy to me, where people come together not to compete to get to consensus at all, but just to have a conversation about can we question our assumptions a little bit, So I'm not spending this episode downloading everything that happened in that weekend by any means at all, but it occurred to me throughout the weekend, okay, one of the things that's happening here, even though it's in the context of the human body, is what Vanessa and I talk about all the time. It's just this very basic thing of just be human. You don't need to identify as the person who knows the things or the person who has discovered the ultimate capital T truth, that you can then show to the world and be the one, who plants their flag in that kind of truth first.
And solves everyone's problems with it.
Right. And then has proof, about how they solved the problems. And it just really struck me like, wow, we do not have a lot of spaces that are talking about how to tolerate nuance and how to make room for differing viewpoints. Certainly, Krista Tippett on Being is a person who's doing that, I think, in a glorious way.
What?
I know. And I'm like, oh, wow, like just conversations, shit. Like, when did we all become where we're competing about who's the rightest and who's the expert? And obviously we're seeing that filter into every part of culture. So blammo, that's what's on my mind.
Do you ever have this happen? Like whenever a conversation starts to come up that I think is going to be juicy, I get this feeling like I want to rest my head down in my hands because like, oh God, what's about to come through feels big and like it's too big to fit through these tight spaces.
I know exactly what you mean.
Like this could not possibly be translated out of this mouth, even though I have a big mouth. So of course, as per usual, my mind exploded in a couple of different directions. And, you and I were talking prior, and I was thinking mostly about just the human tendency to not be comfortable with ambiguity, as you pointed out, or like unpredictability, that there is this part of our brain, just even if we were to look at it from the lens of neuroscience, that there's this part of our brain that constantly wants to assess something and assign meaning and assign cause and effect. So my first reaction was going to be to talk about that when we touched base before this talk here. And then when you were talking, what kept coming to me that's interesting was this call I had with a dear friend right before we jumped on. Now, this dear friend has a really strong voice in feminine leadership. And so we were talking about how over time, as we got into patriarchal and then industrial and capitalistic societies, that it's like we moved from cooperation to competition. I started to think about this kind of like arc of our human species and how we've kind of created a collective unconscious that's always about someone knows. So like, how
Yes.
knowledge is power, right? So like competition is power over. It's not working with, it's power over. So in that model, when we're in the post-industrial society where knowledge is power, it's the only thing left to make you money. Right?
Yeah.
It's like, well, then we're in a society that still believes that competition was the way to operate. It's still working on this old programming. And then in that model, well, then Vanessa and Brooke have to be the ones to know, it works like this. Otherwise, who the fuck's going to pay us for these podcasts? Who is going to pay?
Yeah. Like knowing is a currency.
It's a currency.
It's the
and
currency
it's a status.
right now. Yes.
That's right. Especially in a society that's gotten looped up with like the narcissistic bubble where we think visibility is a good thing. It's a coveted thing. Like status is a coveted thing. Money is, of course, something, we kind of all want, admittedly, but it's like it's a power move. So, if I was to say, well, it seems like the world is like this to me, but what do you think? Well, then, I've put myself in a position of quote unquote weakness in a competitor society.
Mm-hmm.
And B, consumers. Oh, this is another thing. Like, okay, I'm ranting, but people want answers, which feeds the whole cycle. And I guess that loops back to the original point about being human, is that it's become so difficult for us to navigate life without answers.
Yeah.
Without some black and white prescriptive way of living, that we further enforce this expert tendency by being like, tell me what the fuck to do. And if you tell me to do it, I'll believe you and I'll do it. And the stronger your opinion, the more you must know what you're talking about. Yeah. And like, gimme.
And use the D word. You got data? Yeah, man, data.
I was like, dick?
Douche.
What's the D word we're using?
Data points. Show me your data points. And then string them together in a way that
justifies,
holds up your narrative. They're just information until you make them bolster your fucking narrative. Yeah, so much ranting to do. Okay, so the t-shirt for this episode might be I blame Tim Ferriss. I shouldn't say that because I have a lot of affection actually for him. I have a love-hate relationship with Tim Ferriss. He doesn't give a shit. He doesn't know who I am at all. So something happened, right? With Everyone's an Expert around about the time when the book, The 4-Hour Workweek, became a bestseller. I'm such a dick. Why am I fucking attacking this person I don't know? Whose podcast I really love, by the way. He talks to awesome people. P.S. Look at me tolerating ambiguity.
Oh, you can be complex and human and actually
I can feel both ways about him and his work.
And find flaws.
And not love the Everyone's an Expert. Exactly. And it is like, it's the way we make a living. We all get to have our platforms now, which is awesome. That's what we're doing right now. Technology allows us to say whatever the fuck we want to say without some gatekeeper telling us we have permission or don't have permission. But the Everyone's an Expert, it's like, God, it reminds me of when I was at art school. I was a painting major. So I was one of the fine arts majors at a school that has very strong fine arts at RISD. But also a lot of very strong design careers, people who go on to actually make money for a living doing the thing they study. So people who study industrial design or graphic design or architecture, animations, whatever. It's both. So when you're in a fine art major at RISD, certainly no one is giving you this instruction, but there's this feeling that you need to figure out your thing. You need to figure out what your thing is going to be in the contemporary art world upon graduation. And when you figure out your thing, like I make paintings about, or I do performance about, I mean, you're freaking like 20 years old, right? And you have to figure out what the narrative arc of your work is and what you want to comment on about culture at that age. And then stick to it and defend it as like, in that case, obviously art is art. And so everyone gets to have their voice, but it's like you're crafting an identity. It's not, it doesn't allow space for anything new to come through. And the Everyone's an Expert thing, this happens too, except you're creating a brand. As soon as you create a brand that has tight frameworks and parameters about what's right and what's wrong and what's good and what's bad, all that duality stuff, then you have to spend your life defending your brand and defending your system because you've already started from the premise that you're going to tease out what's the good and what's the bad or what's the right decision to make and what's the wrong decision to make. And it completely disempowers people. Because it's like we're supposed to figure out how to tell people how to live their lives. Like how insulting is that? And I mean, even obviously just some little corner of their life, how to eat. God knows we see tons of that, right? Like this is the right way to eat. This is the wrong way to eat. It makes me really, God, I really hope that we can, that this whole Trump administration is going to be a bubble pop into a place where we're like, oh, we need to converse. We don't need to just endlessly defend our territory. That it's okay to talk to people who you disagree with. And it's funny because I get a lot of people who write to me for Liberated Body to pitch being on the show. And I'm noticing I'm getting two kinds of inquiries right now. And one is either from the person who's asking to be interviewed or from a bunch of people who engage with a person's work. And they're basically just saying like, this is what I'm interested in my work. This is what I'm curious about in my work. That's it. And the other person is saying, this is my platform. And they spend their whole email telling me how they're right and all these other people are wrong and they're going to get on my show and they're going to blow everyone's minds with the truth bombs that they have to offer. You know what I mean? Obviously, this is not the way to pitch me to get on the show. These are not the emails that I respond to. So I am seeing like these two streams of ways of framing being in the world and making work in the world that are quite different.
I heard this woman talk about marketing once that was saying that there just are these different types. Like they've always existed, that unfortunately the ones who have that like haughty, I have all the answers kind of experience tend to be very popular because it is simplistic. It's easy to understand. It's easy to follow. It's easy to get behind. Whereas the other person who's more open to like, well, let's see what the right answer is for you. Can I make some space for you to explore that? May not present to someone in the way that they're wishing, right? Which is that life is simple. So I guess there's this thing we should distinguish. It's like in Buddhism, they used to have these things called Dharma debates, where basically people from different schools of Buddhism would come to each other and they would debate Dharma, right? Now, Dharma's truth, right? Quote unquote truth. It's philosophy, but it's meant to be like your path to truth. And here are these people debating what is their foundational truth. And whoever won, like if one person actually presented a point that the others found really salient, that's how they won. It's not like there was a little Buddhist judge and jury, but if the other people were like convinced, they switched their way of thinking.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty cool. Like, that's pretty cool because it's like, okay, you know, what we're really looking at is dogma. It's not that knowledge is a problem. It's not that being good at something is a problem. I mean, where would we be if no one ever shared their kind of information about nutrition or body mechanics or, you know, meditation or all of these different things that you and I appreciate so much? You know, knowledge is a wonderful thing. I love getting that. The problem is twofold as I see it, as we talk about it. One is dogma, and that's where someone clings to it and invests all this power and energy into it as if it is right and the only right thing, which automatically implies everything else is wrong that conflicts with it. And the second problem I see is that very rarely are these experts involving the conversation of the recipient's inner wisdom.
Yes.
Right? Like
that's where I get like, I do not like. Yes. How do we source answers? Exactly.
How do we source answers? Right? That's the biggest question. But part of the problem why that doesn't come across is the consumeristic competitive society that we live in. It is easier to tell people exactly what you think so that your tribe can find you. But B, you know, a lot of us culturally don't do well with finding our own answers because that is a territory. It's like a journey into the unknown, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. One of the questions that came up this weekend was just the basic, like, why do we need to be people who have answers? Like, what makes us want to do that? And I'm not saying that we don't have answers, right? Like we do. And especially when we source them internally, but I mean it in this dogmatic way. Like I know I've, you know, in this case, like I've read the research. I know that this is the right way to approach doing yoga or teaching yoga, right? And I think it comes down to, well, safety on the one hand, like that we mistakenly think that we'll be able to create some safe ground for ourselves if we have the answers that we can defend. And then it's also this piece that you're getting at about, like, we haven't really been well introduced into how to source our own wisdom. It bums me out. And I also think that there's this other piece that is useful to get at, like that what we're not trying to do, speaking of tolerating ambiguity, is do the opposite and feed the unworthiness story, which is like nobody's allowed to speak up or have an opinion or have a way of working or a dialogue that they want to bring to light, because that is really critically important, particularly coming from people who can tolerate ambiguity and aren't competing for some kind of fabricated ultimate truth, because any ultimate truth out there is always going to be fabricated, in my opinion. So I don't want this to become fuel for unworthiness. And for people listening, it might be interesting to see, like for me, I noticed that I have to get better at watching how quickly the mind picks a team, picks a side or good or right. I do it all the time because all human minds do. And then if that idea falls apart, how quickly it goes to the other. You know what I mean? So like even in this, we can say, like, I'm so sick of the everyone's an expert. Everyone has their platform and everyone's speaking up, doing their thing. What I'm not saying, like the opposite ping would be, yeah, everyone should just shut up and like sit at home and read books and like all these stupid blogs. Like I run 2 podcasts. It's awesome to be able to have a platform, So how do we, first of all, notice that the pinging and ponging of like, if not this, then if this is now the good thing, now the bad thing, then I'm going to go to the other pole and ping, a ping, a ping, a ping, always to these dualistic poles. And how do we tolerate ultimately what we're talking about is a certain kind of groundlessness, that we can't ultimately know something as a like out there fact, that we can take on as dogma and wear as an identity that we defend in the world.
So many thoughts. I mean, I'm thinking like, when you're talking about what they call in psychology splitting, it's like, this is right, this is wrong, this is good, this is bad, right? And you can see what happened around our election.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're in a like high age of splitting.
Yeah, it was like, well, everyone who voted for Trump is like this, and everyone who believed in Hillary is like that. And like, everybody had this like expert opinion that was mostly just globalization and fear talking, but somehow we felt safer categorizing like that. Otherwise we wouldn't do it. Right.
Yeah.
But I guess what we should talk about is what's the problem with it? So, you and I can very well say, like, there is no problem with knowledge. There's, thank God, no problem with having an opinion. Like, we have an opinion, which is that you should source some of your own answers. That's an opinion, right?
Yeah.
Like, we are full of opinions, that's for sure. You hear them every episode. So we're not saying that's a problem. What is the problem? Like, what is the problem we're talking about? Like, where does clinging to an answer or really defining a stance as is this is the way and the only way and the truth, where does that become problematic?
For me, like the place I go to when you pose that question is that it becomes problematic because I wind up missing my life. Like,
wow, I did not hear that coming.
I know, but that was where my head went. Like when I keep living in polarities, I'm not really here. I'm just jumping onto the next pretend piece of solid ground. And I can't ever really land here because here is a place with a lot of ambiguity and a lot of different kinds of people and value systems and opinions and data points, And so when I'm constantly scrambling to put ground under my feet, I can't just land here and just appreciate things. Like, so for example, let's say I'm listening to someone who has an opinion, somebody who has a certain kind of expert status. And instead of just hearing them, I'm deciding if I'm going to be on their team or not on their team. And it's like, I'm not really, if I'm dialing it down to that moment of, say, listening to a person have an opinion, I'm just not having an experience of my life. I know this seems far-fetched, but like that was where it went to for me. This pinging and ponging has made me, it pops me out of reality, which is just, it doesn't have a like forever good thing. Like it's funny, I hope they don't mind that they don't, because they brought it up in front of everyone with the group of teachers who I was with. So Leslie Kaminoff, Amy Matthews, Pete Blackaby, I'll put them in the show notes. Beautiful human beings who are really willing to tolerate a lot of ambiguity. And there was this, Leslie and Amy have worked together for like 13 years. They co-wrote a book together, and they have this really awesome, like, kind of funny sibling relationship where they just constantly call each other on each other's shit all the time. Amy calling Leslie more often than not. But so he was saying something about finding, like, I'm paraphrasing, and so I hate doing shit that makes it seem like I'm putting words in people's mouths. But the way I heard what he was saying was something about arriving at a certain, like stripping away the layers until you find the thing you can stand on, the tiny bit of rock that goes all the way down to the center of the earth. Like in the ocean, there's this one rock you can stand on that goes all the way down to the center of the earth. And Amy said, no, it's a raft. So of course, you know, I'm a raft girl, right? I'm into the groundlessness. She's like, and over the years, I've been on the same raft, but I've constructed a really nice raft for myself. Like I've replaced a few boards here and put in some cushy pillows over here. And there's a little, you know, margarita fountain over there. And it's like, I'm just in the raft, but it's a lovely raft. It's a very safe place for me to be unmoored, you know? Mm-hmm. I thought that was so beautiful.
I think in a way, I guess what we're talking about is having spaciousness to have like an ever unfolding experience, be it a conversation, as you pointed to before, like, here's how I see politics and Trump, and here's how I see it. And like, that's so interesting you see it that way. And what is that like for you? And what does that evoke? And then when you think like that, where does that lead? Like this really open-ended, spacious, exploratory conversation, or the same way about the body, like, how do you think it moves? And then what do you think? And that's really alive. It's spontaneous. We never know what's going to happen. As soon as we have a defined paradigm or any dogma, there's no room to hear the other side. The other side is automatically antagonistic to us, right? So then we have to think of ways to defend against it. And again, we're constructing the rafts. Yeah. We're like, well, my raft is really, you know, something.
Right. Well, we're constructing walls, not to go in a political way.
And if you're really terrible, you're like Donald, just splitting, just for fun. But you know, it's funny, like if you think about data points and everything, the craziest part about our world, my dad's like a real cynic. He's like, he hates listening to nutritional ideas anymore. He used to be a really, really curious, but he's like in his 70s and he's like, everything's always fucking changing. First you can't eat eggs. Now you should eat eggs. Like, right. Then you can't have carbs. Now you should have carbs. And like, you know, everything's always changing. And guess what? People follow those diets and they still drop dead running at 50. Like it's so mysterious, you know? And that's true. You know, it's like what we think we understand about the body will be proven in some ways wrong. And what we think we understand about the universe will be proven in some ways wrong. And maybe in some ways, you know, they'll be time tested, you know, but there is actually a lot of mystery, which we used to appreciate more. And we've sort of grown out of finding reverence for mystery. And the other thing that comes up for me is that when we don't tolerate complexity and ambiguity within our conversations, within our thought processes, within our culture, we don't tolerate it within ourselves either.
Yeah, exactly.
So as outside, so inside. And I think that the larger picture that we're making, and I guess our conversation is really addressing, is making space for being human, which means making space for some of the complexity and the mystery and the wonder that is an alive experience that is ever unfolding. It's like if I was to say, being, you're a human and you can be happy all of the time. I already have to, as we've talked about on other episodes, negate my more complex experiences that don't align with the vision of happy. But if I was to say, oh, we have to get down in the trenches and feel it and feel the guttural, well, then I would have to negate all of my experiences that are ethereal. And especially when you start talking about identity and identifying, we have an illusion that even we are static and predictable. We really do believe our identities. We really think that who we were is who we will be. And that is the story. That's the main story. And that story informs that all nutritional things that we understand will stay the same, and exercise and movement. And, you can extrapolate on it. But the problem was even that was a falsity, because I am ever changing and unfolding. I surprise myself in numerous ways. And if you listen to a lot of kind of aware people who are in an alive relationship to themselves, they note the same. Even we. I mean, when you listen to teach about stories about gurus or these big spiritual teachers, they always say they said one thing to one person and another to another person. They acted one way with one person and they acted another way with another person. So where's the consistency? I mean, that's where you have a problem. Okay, sorry, Christians, but I'm about to kick it old school about the Christ traditions. But when you get back into looking at how they chose the Bibles, the Gospels of Christ, there were many, many more than the ones that are now passed down as the New Testament. And one day, a council of humans decided which Gospels would be included and which wouldn't be included. And the way that they did that is which ones tell the most seamless narrative, and which ones stand in conflict to those.
Right. So there's this pruning away.
Yeah, there's a
conflict.
pruning to there's a streamlining to get to one vision of truth, right? One easy to digest identity, as opposed to having this multifaceted, complex experience of this alive process that cannot be tamed, cannot really be understood. How could we wrap our minds around the infinite truth of reality? We cannot. But we sure as shit try, and we've done it in all these different ways and shapes and forms over the years, from our own psychology. Vanessa is a strong, independent person. Therefore, she never has needs and she can't possibly ask for anything. And that's an identity. And I've pruned away all possibilities to there's only one way to view the body, people. It's that it's fucking, like this, and it's, circular. And I don't know, you would say a body thing better. I meant to say spiral, but didn't come out.
I can get down with spiral. Yeah.
Yeah. There's only one politics that are right, and there's only one religion that is right, and there's only one way of viewing reality that is right. And it's all the same innate tendency to want something to stand on, even if it was a rock deep down in the ocean.
And when we're always trying to figure out what the right is, the right way to eat, the right blah, whatever, all the examples you just gave, we're building all of these walls inside of ourselves. They're the exact same walls that allow us to delude ourselves into thinking that we're fixed, that the world is fixed, and that there's some ultimate truth, or that each category gets its own top of the mountain truth. And we do lose so much juiciness. I think that what we find, or what I have found, when I let go of certain moorings, let's say identity moorings that I've had, Brooke is like this. One of the ones that has come up for me a lot in the last year is the nice person, the helpful person, the good person. And when that goes away, it doesn't mean that I'm not, a kind and thoughtful human being, right? It doesn't go, but it doesn't ping automatically to the opposite. Now I'm going to be a dick. I'm going to give everyone peace of my mind. I should have spoken up more. No, it's just that what I notice in a moment is like, I don't feel like it's necessary or useful for me. And again, it would depend completely on the moment and on the circumstance, because there's plenty of moments where I move towards something that might still look like that role for sure. I mean, every day at my job as a rolfer, right? But then there are these times where I see like, oh, that would not be at all helpful for me to play that role. I would only be doing it because I feel like I'm supposed to play that role, you know, and it would be harmful actually for me to play that role right now. And it would only be self-serving. So I can see those kinds of things more clearly. So when that falls away, like it does feel initially a little disorienting. And honestly, there's a little bit of a grief process of like, oh, I don't get to kind of hang my hat on ownership of that facet of my identity. But if I can hang out with that disorienting feeling and just continue to watch in this example, this moment where I realize like me moving forward in the helper identity is not going to be helpful. And so I'm not going to. And people might put all kinds of stories on me about that. Brooke, who's not helpful. Brooke, who's not nice, you know? They may or they may not, depending on the circumstance. Like, it's a tremendous relief. Like, it really does open up all this space for me to loop it back to what we were saying at the very beginning, to source what's true for me in any given moment. Because I'm not just grabbing onto the constructions that I've had my whole life, which PS haven't served me particularly well. Like some of them have in some moments, but when they're forced and I'm doing something because I think I'm supposed to, and it's just by rote, it's just the way the brain programming plays out, you know? I miss all these opportunities to be in touch with myself and the aliveness of the world, and that the world is actually like this big supportive place for all of these different things to exist, because otherwise, why the fuck would they?
I'm thinking about Buddha saying, like, don't just trust me, you know, do it. He always said, don't believe me. Mm-hmm. So he would give all these teachings about meditation and dharma and karma and blah, blah, blah. And then he would say, don't believe me. Right. And it was like, do it for yourself. And I think why that's coming to my mind is it's like, okay, well, in January, I was in this clinic getting treated for my mold illness. And my doctor, thank God, is an expert in toxic environmental diseases and could offer me a prescription to get well. And I didn't just seek for my own answers on how to deal with mold illness like inside of myself. Not to say that was a wrong approach, but, you know, then again, maybe we have a lot of delusions and a lot of wiring that doesn't always allow us to contact the deeper layers. And I could have put myself at physical risk by not tuning in to someone who's had an experience around this. So there's this interesting thing where I have respect for someone who's got a skill set and is an expert in a field. Of course, I'm an expert in my field and you are an expert in your field. At the same time, it was incumbent upon me to make sure that the course of treatment he recommended felt right, that it felt in alignment. Also, to not just believe him, but to see for myself, to try it, to be curious, to experiment. And I think this is the nuance that we're talking about when we start talking about knowledge, because knowledge has these two sides, right? It's such a beautiful thing. Like, human lives are saved every day because of knowledge. You know, we all live and grow and thrive in some ways because of knowledge. But we're also really glutted with knowledge these days, to the point where it's obscuring our ability to like tune in and find truth for ourselves and play with life and experiment and test things out, you know, where we just take someone else's opinion the way a child might take their parents, you know, that typical kind of hierarchical model where it's like someone outside is going to save me.
Yeah.
And that's where a real problem lies. It's like, even with our teachers, we have respect and reverence for all of them, but we do not blindly cling to their dogma at all.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I am constantly experimenting and feeling into what's right. And maybe I'll have a blind spot and I'll miss something, but I'm ever in the process of feeling the teachings. Right?
Yeah. And that word is perfect, right? Because discernment is what you're getting at. And like, it's something that we just are not, like, I think about my son's education, like they just don't give them enough education about how to discern for themselves. And you use the word feeling, like you're constantly feeling, constantly meaning as things unfold in real time, how it feels for you. So it's not this sharp mental energy, which again, you're like creating your own data points. You're pitting what their opinion is or what their thought process is against something else, and like getting really kind of laser sharp, like, is it a pro and con lists and all that stuff? Like you're feeling into moment by moment, like, is this still right for me? And as you said, not because we're going to get it perfect and be like, all right, but it's growing a muscle, like it's growing a muscle of discernment. It's growing a skill set that helps us to navigate our lives. You know, fundamentally, they're groundless. They just are, you know, we just pretend that we know what's coming. Like we all think we're going to live to something 70, 80, I don't know. I can see you giggling. I'm like, do it. Thank you
for making the pause so that can come out of my mouth. They just are. You think you're going to live that long, but you could drop dead right now. Right. And that's the truth.
Well, goodbye.
It is the truth.
It is the truth. And so it's that settling into like the present tense that it can feel groundless, you know, but we're not constantly thinking like I might die at any moment. Like that's not settling. That's still jumping out ahead of yourself and kind of looking back, you know, it's like jump out ahead. Maybe I'll die when I step out the front door. Like that's not what we're talking about. The present moment is really quite juicy. I think people think it's like boring or scary, or we don't go there very often.
What I'm thinking of now, did you ever read Biology of Belief? No. Is that it? The Bruce Lipton book about the cells?
I bought it. So there's that. I bought it, but I haven't read it.
I don't know if I'm quoting the right title, you all, but it's Bruce Lipton and we'll have it in the resources. But anyway, so he's writing about cells, right? He's essentially writing about cellular biology, and he was a biologist, and through his work with cells kind of like had a spiritual epiphany, and it goes on from there. But, you know, on this basic level, he said like the way that cells work is they're either open and receptive, in which case, you know, all of the things can come and bind to receptor sites, and they'll take them in, and they'll do what cells do, right? Which is being present. It's like doing what we do, being open and receiving from our ecosystem. And then we do what we do and we interact with the ecosystem. Or they can be closed and protected, and they'll kind of shut down those receptor sites, and not both, one or the other. And he kind of course, likens that to us. And now I don't know if that's wholly true or not. We might be a little more complex, but there is something to that. It's like as soon as we have to cling to any dogma about our identity, dogma about the way life works, how we move, how we eat, you know, anything, we're already a closed loop. Mm-hmm. And there's no possibility for that intimacy and that exchange and that growth that happens, you know. I think that's kind of one of the things we've been saying. And as you and I are so interested in truth and evolution and inhibition of like our conditioning, we sort of have to remain open circuits, right? We have to be in a call and response with our life, because if we're not in a call and response with life, we know how slippery it is to just believe all your conditioning. Yeah. I mean, it's the easiest thing in the world, isn't it?
Yeah. It's so
believe
fast.
What you believe.
Yeah. Lightning fast. You just go there.
Yeah. And then thinking, like, I was in this group once, I won't say where, but like a kind of processing group. And there was a woman sharing, and she was telling this whole story she had about this kind of epiphany, where this like spiritual being or something, came to her and said, "You're like this, and this is why people don't really like you." And it felt like this really tender epiphany for her that she had to show up and be different because she got this information from this guide. And I was like, "Can I offer you something?" Because my experience of her was nothing like what she said. It wasn't like that at all to be on the other side of her. There was something to the way that she could rub people, but it wasn't that. And actually, people liked her. So when I said, "Can I say something? Can I offer you something?" which was going to be, that's not at all my experience. And so perhaps that's not as true, like black and white, bold letters, truth, as it feels. Maybe there's some complexity to this experience. She said, "No, I don't want to hear from you. That was my experience, and I want it to be the way it is."
Oh, God.
I'm
saying, "Oh, God," because my heart just felt so.
Yeah. I was shocked because what she was clinging to was a story that was actually creating pain for her and might even lead to more pain. Yeah. And it was especially interesting because it was a story about how others experience her. Like, "Hello, I'm an other right outside.
Right here in the room.
It's not that."
Yeah.
So, right? So something's up here. Something's really up. So this is the way I think being an expert, you and I could just rant on the cultural piece, but talking about the personal piece, we even think we're experts on ourselves.
I know.
And oh, Lord.
I'm here to tell you I'm not
Sometimes
an expert
we are the
myself.
worst judges. Y'all know that. Y'all listening to us know that. Our Sensi tribe is almost consistently the worst judges of themselves. We miss how charismatic we are. We miss how magical we are. We miss how complex we are. We miss how gifted we are. We miss the subtle ways we can be challenging that we didn't identify in our construct of our narrative of who we are. We are served in our aliveness, in our expansion, in our healing, our growth, throw whatever fucking word you like onto that process, by being an open system, right? And actually having conversations. And maybe really that's part of what it means to be human.
Yeah. It's funny how it's gotten, there's just not that many spaces where it's happening. It's happening here. I'm glad for that. But like more conversations where we can tolerate ambiguity, I would be thrilled to see as much of that as possible.
Yeah. Write us about that if y'all have some ideas. Who's out there talking about ambiguity? Let us know.
Thank you so much for listening to today's show. The show notes, including any of the resources that we mentioned, live at blissandgrit.com. If you go to the website, you'll see each episode's post and the resources are within that post. You can also come chat with us on social media. We're at Instagram and Facebook as Bliss and Grit. And just a note again that we will not have a new episode next week, so it's a perfect time to catch up on any Bliss and Grit backlog you have in iTunes. We're going to be in Michigan together, completing our realization process training with Judith Blackstone, and probably drinking a lot of bulletproof coffee, and probably having impromptu dance parties, as we do. If you want to support the show, you can write us a review on iTunes or Stitcher or on our Facebook page, which is Bliss and Grit. And if technology is not your thing, but you're enjoying the show, then we would love it if you could just pass it along to any friends who you think might resonate with it. We also have a new subscribe form on the website, blissandgrit.com. Please sign up there if you want to know about events we're going to start with goodies this summer. Whoever's on that list is going to be the first to know about it. So head over there. Huge gratitude to all of you who have written reviews already. Here is one from Carol Y. in the UK. This is my must-listen podcast. I love the rapport and the topics really resonate and are approached in a nuanced and thoughtful way. It's a great balance of reassurance, you're not alone, and reframing, oh, I hadn't looked at it that way. It's also a great gateway to other thinkers and content. Thank you, Brooke and Vanessa, and please keep it up. We are loving it, and so we will. This is super fun play for us. Thank you for that, and we'll be back in 2 weeks.